Hey everyone, welcome back to the It's Mind Game podcast and YouTube channel. I'm very excited to be introducing you to Omega, who is going to share with us her journey of a 6-year missing period. It is quite different from stories or journeys that we've heard in the past. And with that in mind, I just wanted you to have a heads up that there is, I guess, 2 points of conversation that can be quite confronting, and that is the conversation around sexual abuse and abortion. So no, we don't dig deep into these conversations, but there is a mention of it. And obviously, they're quite sensitive things. So before you start listening, I would like you to just have a moment with yourself and think about your emotional state, and if they are topics you can listen to at this point in time, or if it is something you want to save to later or listen to something else like one of our previous episodes instead. That in mind, while there is, bringing to surface some, tricky and troubling things, I also aim to make women that are going through the same thing not feel alone, and know that it is a safe space to talk about these things, and it is important for us to have conversations and heal and to work on ourselves in order to move forward with our lives. So I'm really grateful for Omega for coming forward and being so transparent with her journey. Because it is no small feat to be able to come forward and discuss such things. You'll also hear her journey is quite beautiful, and going from being so disconnected with herself and her body and sort of throwing herself into bodybuilding competitions to finding home in herself. And now she lives a life where she's so connected with her body and her mind, and her training, nutrition, everything reflects that now. She is an exercise scientist and menstrual educator, so a lot of the principles that she uses to keep her body happy and healthy and hormones thriving is based on those principles. So there is a lot to learn and resonate throughout this whole episode, and especially the transformations that take place from living in a place of deprivation of food and over-exercising, and the stages you go through to find balance and find what it is that actually makes you happy, and knowing how to set boundaries and knowing how to work out what you want, why you want it. And there's a lot of uplifting conversation in this episode. So thanks so much for tuning in. I'm going to commence this episode and I hope you love it. Please subscribe. Please share this episode with someone who you think would get something out of it. And as always, I'm just so grateful to have you joining in. Hey everyone, welcome back to the It's Mind Game podcast. My name is Jade, and today I'm very excited to be here with Omega, who is an exercise scientist, menstrual educator, and the founder of the Fitness Flow Method. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Jade. Thanks for having me.
And I actually love the little connection of how we got in contact with each other, because I'm a massive fan of Elissa Vitti's work, and in particular, the In the Flow book. And I was writing down a few questions on the Facebook group there to sort of work out what was going on with my cycle, because let's be honest, it's a massive indicator of health. And you were kind enough to offer some tips and corrections on things that I could do to help support my cycle. And then we got talking, and it led from one thing to the next. And then I learned of your period experience, and a big part of our audience suffer from hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is the loss of period, and a lot of them tend to get misdiagnosed with PCOS because there's so many similarities between the two conditions and so many things overlap. And yes, all the things you're quite familiar with and our audience. But when we got talking, you actually mentioned that you had lost your period for 6 whole years as well. And I guess no better place to start. Could you share with us how that happened, what your lifestyle was like, what changes you made? And it feels like all of your journey sort of led you to where you are now and how you help women now. So I guess I'm so interested in all of it, how it started and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, you mentioned that I lost my period for 6 years, and I am just about to come out with a YouTube video. I've never publicly expressed this, so this will be my first time talking about this publicly. So I lost my period after a sexual traumatic event, after a sexual assault. And I I thought I might have been pregnant during that time. And I was 16 and I just waited it out. I was like, I felt so much shame around it. And I felt so scared about it. And I didn't talk to anybody. And so, you know, after that time, you know, I lost my period. I didn't know what happened, where it went. And after that time, my parents they sponsored bodybuilding shows. I grew up around lots of bodybuilders. And so like I looked at my dad shortly thereafter and I was like, hey dad, like I want to go to the gym. I want to learn how to exercise and lift weights. And my parents were super stoked. They like showed me the ropes and everything. And I got really into it. And I'm sure a lot of your audience can relate. It's like we get so into it, too into exercise. That was definitely my case. I got too obsessed with exercise, too obsessed with eating. And when I look back at it now, it's like I was trying to control my own body, something that felt so much out of my own control, right? I didn't know it at the time, but I also had PCOS around that time. I had what's called a pregnancy mask. Have you heard of that?
No, I
Pregnancy
haven't.
mask?
No.
No, it's where it's like a hyperpigmentation. A lot of people with PCOS have hyperpigmentation. I still have some on my arm here, but a pregnancy mask where you get hyperpigmented around your face, and you can even kind of look like raccoon eyes. So I had that going on around that time as well. So I had PCOS prior to this event, but this event in combination with training and dieting, like, you know, I'm sure you and a lot of your audience can relate to this, just like restricting calories, eating 1,200 calories or less every day, and then working out sometimes twice a day. And, you know, I mean, that's the beginning of my story. I don't know if you have any questions.
Yeah, well, for one, thank you for coming out and sharing something that's so vulnerable and no doubt has, you know, taken such a toll on you. And yeah, I mean, it's such a huge thing to come out and be willing to share that sort of experience with other women. And, you know, it's really common for women to lose periods because of dieting and exercise, and they tend to be up and coming conversations, which is really wonderful. But unfortunately, you're not the first person I've heard who has gone through a sexual trauma and has lost their cycle as a result of it. And, you know, it's such a vulnerable thing, but I'm glad that more women are becoming willing to talk about it, because, you know, there is so much emotions that take hold from an experience like that affect our health in so many areas. And it's just not recognized. I have a girlfriend in particular who is going through something similar to what you did with the loss of her cycle. And a big part of the medical help she's getting, they're sort of just sweeping it under the rug of, you know, the pill blanket. But she goes, she's never really been into health and fitness. Like that's just not her cup of tea. But she goes, no, but I can feel this is emotional. Like it's too uncanny that everything happened at the timing that it happened. But you know, so thank you for being willing to come on and share that, because I'm sure there is women out there listening going, oh my goodness, like that's me. That is so me.
Yeah. And it's important that we share that with each other and with the community, because it's a common thing. So, you know, that happened. And then I, you know, got into weightlifting and was an avid exerciser, became a personal trainer at a young age, got on stage, competed in bodybuilding before there was a bikini category, competed in bikini, you know, like won third place in a national competition. And after that competition, I gained 30 pounds in 3 months.
Yeah.
And that was.
Yeah. Was that sort of a backlash from the extreme dieting, and sort of then you got stuck in the overeating to compensate, which is what so many women are terrified of, and often that's why they diet for even longer, because it's like, but if I let go even a fraction, I lose all control. But, you know, that's one of our biggest markers of an eating disorder and being undernourished. If you feel that ravenous that you can't control yourself, you are undernourished. Like hands down, there's nothing else going on other than the fact that your body is screaming, feed me. How were you emotionally going from obviously this intense lifestyle with restriction and training. And obviously it's got its fun parts to it. There's some elements that we really enjoy, but going from one extreme to the next, it sounds like that was quite a slingshot. Emotionally, how did you cope? Like what was that like for you?
That's a really good question. During that time, I actually switched my profession from being a personal trainer and studying exercise science in school to learning how to make pastries.
Really?
Yeah,
That's a unique one. Do you think,
that is
and I'm saying this with
shot.
all seriousness because we know, Minnesota starvation experiment, if you're deprived, all you can think about is food. Do you think some element of that motivation to be like pastry chef was potentially somewhat based around the fact that you were just so hungry that you thought that food was really, really exciting, but it wasn't?
Mm,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, like that was fun too, but the and I was cooking for a group of people that I worked with pretty much every night also.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it gave me an opportunity to think about food all the freaking time. I was thinking about food, pastries and cooking for people and recipes. And I thought it was so much fun. And, looking back on it now, I know in my heart that that was a crucial part of my healing experience, to allow myself to dive head first into all sorts of delicious food and really like nourish myself, overnourish myself, but really just allow that to happen and allow it to flow. And during that time also, I was diagnosed with hypothyroid syndrome. And that's when I got that diagnosis. So, I wrote a lot of the weight loss off into like, oh, I have hypothyroid syndrome also. And, a part of me, I think when people get diagnosed with things, like there's some relief and there's also grief, right? And there was relief knowing like I'm gaining all this weight for a reason. And then there was the grief of like, oh, I just like was a national bikini competitor and now I like feel not great about myself all the time.
And
So,
the attention shift as well, from sort of being the epitome of health and fitness. But it sounds like you almost replaced one level of attention for the next, though, because even though you've jumped into this new world with all the cooking, you still would have been getting so much gratitude from people around you for being the person that, facilitates these beautiful experiences where people can bond over food. Would you say that you are a bit of a people pleaser and that you like to sort of make people happy? And like, don't get me wrong, everyone's got that to a degree. I'm just more so thinking from the competitive side of things, where it's like it's nice to impress people. And then just the way how you very warmingly said you love cooking for people and sharing that experience. It sounds like, again, such a warming, heartfelt thing that you like to do for people.
Totally. Yeah. I think so. This was like, oh God, how old am I? I'm going to be 33 at the end of the month. This was when I was 22.
Yeah.
And so I would say, yeah, when I was 22-year-old woman, I was definitely a people pleaser. And now I'm like, people can please themselves. I'm going to please myself these days.
Yes. And do you find that like that's such a big lesson to learn? Because it's so common that, the whole competing thing happens in your early 20s, and then you realize that you've got to prioritize your health and you realize that you've got to set boundaries. And it's a tough pill to swallow, but it's one of the most worthy ones that serves you for the rest of your life. And, you can still want to make people happy, but having the actual strength to go, this is what I need to be happy and healthy, and actually pursue it full-heartedly. Did you find that was sort of like a lesson that you got throughout this whole experience, and it's sort of translated all throughout your life now?
Yeah, I would say that lesson came much later when I was already on my path to healing. I would say like this pocket in my life was like the kickstart to my healing. Gaining weight, as you know, was like the kickstart to my healing process. And it was just like the tip of the iceberg. And then those more emotional, deep lessons around my, like you say, my own boundaries, honoring my own boundaries, that definitely came later. Yeah.
So I guess what happened next? So you're doing the pastry chefing, you're enjoying that.
Yeah.
Where was the next stage?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. So the next stage was the keto diet.
Oh,
That
yes.
was, yeah,
No,
everyone goes
everyone's
through that phase.
guilty. Like we've done the keto, we've done the fasting, we've done the so
Yeah. Next was the keto diet phase. And let's see, then I moved back to California and decided that pastry chefing wasn't for me. I had like a lull, a complete lull in my direction and career because it seemed like the structure of exercise, bodybuilding, taking care of my body as I knew it was not sustainable. And that resounded deeply in me. And that's what ultimately led me on the path of more feminine fitness. And, you know, like I gave that up. And I got burnt out on cooking for people every night for a year. It was like, oh my God, like burnt out on that. And so did the keto diet and then recertified myself as a personal trainer. Gosh, that was 2018. I think I keep looking at the date up here, but I don't have any year up there. So it's 2021 now.
It is.
So in 2018, I recertified as a personal trainer, finished my degree in exercise science, and then went to work in a functional neurology clinic. And in the beginning of that time period, I also entered into one more and my final competition at that point. And I'll also say, I mean, I guess like since I already shared about the sexual assault, I'll also say before this time period in 2016, I also competed then, and then I fell pregnant, and then also had this crazy abortion experience where I tried to abort the fetus naturally with herbs, and it did not work. I was too late in the game to make that work. And then I did the pill abortion and ended up bleeding for 30 days. And everybody knows that that is going to throw your hormones off as well. So I went through another healing process with my hormones after that. And then decided to compete again. And then, and then that brought me to work in this functional neurology clinic where that's where I cut my teeth on really helping people balance their hormones in a way that was not with food necessarily. It was a very interesting experience, but yeah, that's where I landed in 2018.
Yeah, my goodness, you've been through so much. That's a lot to sort of interpret, and especially to be in the moment as those things were happening and learn how to navigate, well, what's next for me and how am I going to take this next step? And so many things go on in your life as it is, let alone when you get confronted with other obstacles that you went through as well. Can I ask, because you said you competed a couple of times, sort of like in between, did you find that your motivation for competing was purely because like you just really enjoyed the experience and you enjoyed dieting down? Or do you think that sometimes it could have come from a place where there's other things going on emotionally, with work, with family, whatever it might be, and the comp prep, because it requires so much focus, it's a beautiful distraction of, I can deal with life later. I'm just going to focus on me and my goal. And, comps are so interesting in that respect because whoever commits to competing, for the most part, everyone around you is your cheerleader. Like, oh, wow, you're so determined. You're so dedicated. Look at you go. And there isn't often the question of like, is this a wholehearted choice or is this a really nice distraction for me for the next 12 weeks?
Totally. I'd say yes, absolutely. And I say a big part of it for me was, in retrospect, I didn't know this at the time, but like being able to access it now and like look at my younger self and have compassion for my younger self is like, I wanted to control that which seemed uncontrollable to me, is like, oh my God, like I'm bleeding for 30 days. Like, oh my gosh, my body is totally out of control. Well, I have this thing that I used to do that totally allowed me to control my body. I'm going to go back to this thing and totally
safety.
control my body. Exactly.
Yeah. Can I ask, because obviously the bleeding for 30 days is intense. Did you get other symptoms alongside with that? As in, were you really lethargic, dizzy spells? And I guess on the emotional side of things, did you find that emotionally you were just up, down? Because, obviously the abortion side of things is so confronting as it is, let alone 30
Mhm.
days of intense hormonal fluctuations. I don't know,
Mhm.
I'm just trying to imagine what that would be like. And it just feels like a whirlwind in my head. Like, where's ground? Like, I need ground
Mhm.
again. How do I find it?
Right. Yeah. Total whirlwind.
Mm,
Absolutely. I had a supportive partner who was like with me and, a champion in this experience that I was having. Obviously, like that's like his hit. He had a completely different experience that, later came through, and it was very hard for him, but he was very supportive to me in that process.
mhm,
And so that was very grounding for me, having that support. A few of my friends knew too, and that was also very grounding for me.
mhm.
And in terms of the emotions, like I felt very settled in my decision, and that was grounding for me too.
Yeah.
And I did feel a lot of fatigue during that time. I gained weight. I didn't get tested during that time, but I believe I went a little bit more hypothyroid too. I probably tend to be on that spectrum.
Mhm.
And so I probably went a little bit more hypothyroid, gained a little bit of more weight, and definitely didn't feel optimal in my body. And then we ended up going to Hawaii, where I received acupuncture from, this person that my partner knew to help stop the bleeding. And it worked like a charm. After 32 days of bleeding straight.
Really? Wow. I'm a
Yeah.
massive believer in acupuncture, and especially if it's, because you've got different level of experts, and you can see some that just aren't as good as what they do, but then you've got others that are so incredibly well educated and versed in whatever field they specialize in. And like my acupuncture was an absolute blessing in disguise and so magical.
Mhm.
And so when I hear other people go, "Oh, I saw my acupuncturist, and they were exactly what I needed in the time that I needed." Yeah, I always love hearing about those sorts of experiences. Um,
Totally.
so was that just the one treatment that they did, or were you seeing him for a couple of weeks in order to get everything settled
Yeah.
down and sort of back to base?
I think I saw her for 2 or 3 sessions. I can't remember, but I
Wow.
know that it wasn't over the course of a couple of weeks because we were only on the island for 2 weeks.
Mhm.
And I I cannot remember seeing her more than 2 or 3 times, but it was just like that. She said, "Okay, you might feel a little uncomfortable. You're going to bleed a lot tonight, and then tomorrow in the afternoon you will have stopped bleeding." And that's exactly what happened.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? Because
Amazing.
anything sort of hormones and bleeding and things like that, from a lot of my experience with Western medicine anyway, everything they suggest to it's more of a guessing game as to, oh, this could happen, or this could happen, or maybe this will happen, and it's like, all right, let's just throw pasta at the wall and see what sticks. But when when you see someone like that, he goes, no, this is what you will experience. No, if that's or maybes, it's like, wow, how reassuring and how comforting to just have someone be so direct and specific, and then it actually plays out exactly how they said it.
Yeah, that was the amazing part. I was like, wow, this is some this is some amazing medicine. Like
Yes.
and I hadn't received too much acupuncture before that, not because I was against it or skeptical,
Mm,
just because it never was in the field.
yes. Yeah. And it tends to be one of those things though, it's because it's more of a niche medical treatment for a lot of things. I mean, I only searched for an acupuncturist when I was trying to get my period back. And it's like, oh well, I've tried every other thing and I haven't tried this, so I'll give that a go. And
Mm,
whenever I have come across different acupuncturists, I've found that they tend to pick a specialty. Like there's the one I saw specialized in hormonal health and pregnancy. And then I remember seeing one when I was 18 who specialized in digestion. So even though they've got that umbrella of acupuncture, they have, for the most part, they tend to have the areas that they choose to specify in. But yeah, I
mm.
think it's an absolute magical practice.
Magical indeed. It
Yeah.
is. That's the perfect word to describe it. It felt magical in that moment.
Were you sort of in like a meditative state when you received the acupuncture treatment? Mm,
Yeah, absolutely. It was, I mean, you know how acupuncture works. You're in
mm,
a quiet room for 20 to 30 minutes. So, and yeah, it was definitely a spiritual experience for like this whole experience of being pregnant, not knowing, finding out, making the decision, releasing that spirit baby, knowing that like, my personal belief is that that spirit is always with me, and I chose to not let it come through me at that time. And
yeah.
thank goodness I had that choice. And I don't know if you know what's happening in Texas right now in the US, but they've banned abortions in the US right now, which feels like a very, very scary reality because I mean, that was a very important decision for me to make.
I didn't realize I'd banned it completely. I remember hearing talks of because it had it previously been abortions at 20 weeks. Or I remember because
Hmm.
the legislation in Australia, I'm not even like you're allowed to have abortions in Australia.
Hmm.
I'm not sure what the timeline is, but I believe it's less than what it was in America previously or in Texas. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's such a controversial topic because there's so many things that are involved in the decision to pursue a
Oh
pregnancy
yeah.
or not. um yeah,
Hmm.
it's so tough,
So
and I think it would be a never-ending conversation to try and have the perfect world order on it because there's just way too many variables. um but I love that how you can sort of talk about this experience and say that it was a spiritual experience for you, and that there has been those life lessons involved in it, and the way you talk about it, it's almost like it served you into your next step and your next path.
yeah, it really did. It really did. And it's like, and all of this was a healing experience. Like I said, like gaining those 30 pounds, like on my frame that was like previously 109 pounds. Like that was that
Mm.
was an experience, to feel this fullness and lushness in my body. And um, I have an accepting attitude towards it. And the second time where my hormones felt off and I gained weight again, there was this vibe of like, I accept this.
Mm.
I know that my body is doing the healing process that it needs to do. But like as you mentioned before, or your question before was like, did you go back to competing because you felt like it was, something that was like tried and true? It's like, yeah, I did.
Mm. Yeah, and it's so common. And I think, I guess that's where it's nice when people start to open up the conversation around it, though, because then the next stage of that could be you've got someone who you love or care about competing, and it's like, hey, I support you 100%, but I just want to make sure you're all right. Like, what's the big driving force? And you obviously can't say it to everybody, but if you've got a close friend or a family member and you care about them, I mean, it should be okay to just ask that question. Like, are you
Totally.
absolutely okay? Are you hiding from something, or is this just because there's nothing wrong with sort of owning it as well and just being like, no, I just want to prove to myself that I can do this training, do this diet, and that's okay too. Like everyone's got their own journeys and their own paths. And I'm sure you've probably come across conversations where the whole idea of competing, it can be so easily demonized and so easily glorified. And again,
Yeah.
it just comes back to like, why are you doing it? And if you're happy to do it and it's not covering up or any other sort of emotional, psychological baggage, then like it's okay to have that goal. Um,
Mhm.
but especially when you've had women that have lost their cycles or had eating disorders from competing, I think because it's still quite raw, it can be like, no, just absolutely nobody should. And it's like, yeah, because you run that risk. You run the risk of falling into an eating disorder when you've never previously had one. And I remember saying to my clients back when I was PTing and I just stopped competing, I said, you've got to understand, they've gone, but you're so tiny still. And I said, yeah, but you've got to understand any weight that I've gained after I've been on stage is like I'm fat now. And of course I'm not, but once you've seen how lean you can be, anything outside of that is fat. And it's
Totally.
yeah. And it's like, do you want to set yourself up for that? Because if you're so happy with how you are, you're creating the space for that opinion of yourself by getting to your leanest. And you know, it's a potentially dangerous choice, and I think a lot more thought needs to go into it before going, okay, this is for me, this is my goal, this is what I'm going to do. Because we've seen the repercussions emotionally, hormonally, physically. The most, it's not just once you step off stage, you're back to your normal life. Like your life changes forever. And it could be your path, which is wonderful if it is, use it to your advantage. But it is a serious decision.
It really is. It really is. And I really appreciate how you say, I don't know if I would classify it as body dysmorphia, but how you say like, oh, like any millimeter, centimeter of fat that I gain is like, oh, I am now quote unquote fat. Whereas really it's our body regulating itself.
Yes.
And our body is way more intelligent than we give it credit for. And it knows how to heal us. And I mean, for me, and I know for a lot of people, it's about trusting your body. For me, it was about releasing control, right? And trusting my body and really trusting that my body had everything it needed in order to heal.
Yeah, I found that surrender was like the ultimate lesson to getting my period back, is just learning to surrender. It's like you've got to stop trying to make everything happen on a timeline or to the perfect plan, or you know, all the things that we previously have done with all of our life choices. It's like, in order for your body to heal and to get your hormones back to where they need to be, it really feels like just putting your hands behind your head and saying, go. Just, I'm going to nourish you, I'm going to rest you, just do whatever you got to do. And it's scary. It's a scary feeling, which is so bizarre because the only thing our bodies want to do is keep us alive. And yet the idea of trusting that is like, no, are you sure? Like, are you sure you're going to? And obviously in hindsight, you can have a bit of a giggle about it because in the moment it's not fun. Like it's terrifying on multiple levels. But when you can look back and go, oh my gosh, you were so scared of just doing something that is like the most innate thing in you, is to heal and be healthy. Yeah, and it's such an interesting perspective from in the moment to in the future. And I feel like I could ramble a million miles away to you about that for such a long time. But I guess going back to your journey, you've gone to Hawaii, you've seen the acupuncturist, you've had the treatments, the bleeding's finally stopped. You come home, what happens?
Yeah, come home. I am glad to only bleed for 5 days. You know, having a I came back to having a regular period quite quickly, and then decided to compete again after that. And that's when I decided to recertify as a personal trainer, finish my degree in exercise science, and then go work at this functional neurotherapy clinic. Yeah.
Yeah. Because with the competing multiple times in a row, did you sort of do a reverse diet in between, or did you stay relatively lean, or what was your, because I guess adding some context to the question is that often when you repetitively diet, refeed, it can make every next prep, your body can be more resistant. So I'm just curious as to, on the timeline, because you sounds like you've competed quite a few times versus that first prep, which I'm not going to say effortless, but you know what I mean in regards to your body's super responsive to progressive overload, caloric restriction. Like your body goes, oh, cool, let's do it. But once you've done that a couple of times, but it's, oh, you know, are we doing this again? Like, really? You really want to diet me down? Did you find that your preps changed each and every time you entered into the next one?
Yeah, you know what? My refeed was my body just gaining weight naturally. I didn't ever consciously do a refeed. That actually wasn't even in my vocabulary until like 6 or 7 years ago. And so when I started competing, I was 18 years old. I had an 18-year-old body. So it was like, sure, like we'll lose weight. We'll be 100 and some odd pounds for sure. Yeah. And, so like in between these two competitions that I did later in life, I didn't do a refeed then either. It was like, okay, this is my last competition. And then I thought about doing another competition. I was like, okay, no, yeah, this is my last competition. I swear to myself. And
Yeah.
that second one that I mentioned was actually my last one.
Was there any particular reason that officially made it the last? Like, do you feel just emotionally, mentally, you just felt like you were ready to close that chapter? Or was there sort of other things going on that you thought, oh, maybe it's time to prioritize these other elements of my life?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I was, you mentioned that, there are some people where, yeah, competition is your lifestyle and it makes you really, really happy, brings you a lot of joy. That wasn't me. It didn't really bring me a lot of freaking joy. It was something that I did it was something that I really wanted to do in the beginning when I was 18 to connect with my parents and my aunties and uncles, that weren't my blood aunties and uncles, but they were the aunties and uncles that, I had around me, and like make them proud, and show them that I could be a winner. So it was very much this, like you said in the beginning, this people pleasing sort of thing that I engaged in, that was like, I want to make my family proud of me.
Yeah. And I'm sure so many people listening to this right now will know exactly how you feel and the motivations behind competing. And because at the end of the day, that's all we want, isn't it? Like, we just want to feel connected. We want to feel loved. We want to show love. Like, at our absolute core, that's all we really want. And, it comes up a lot more in the eating disorder side of things too, which is it's so easy to fall into an eating disorder when you feel lonely, because you don't want to feel that way. So it's like, well, I'll distract myself with just being hungry all the time. Or on the other side of the fence, I'm just going to eat to numb myself. Like, it ebb and flows in so many different directions. But at the core, it's like, all right, what emotion do you really need to be happy? And how do we get it? I guess moving forward and one, thank you again for just sharing everything, because you're just so open and honest about all the different stages, and your insight into reflections on your mental state as well is just really helpful, I guess, for anyone who's trying to, one, know what it was like to be in your shoes in certain times, or for those that are just living this way right now, going, oh my goodness, that's me. It's like, I don't know what to do in between, so I'll just do another comp, and I'll just do another comp. And as you said, sometimes it's an addictive thing as well. It's like, all right, just one more. Because if you're not doing that, then what are you doing? And they're big questions. They're such big questions to ask. Now, I guess I am so interested in how you got more into, I guess, cycle syncing sort of methods, and how you, I guess, your own training, as well as how you work with other women to actually maximize their hormones to work in with their health and fitness goals. Do you want to share maybe a little bit about how that sort of looks in regards to training and nutrition, and how it can complement your cycle?
Absolutely. I'll say first that I was thinking about starting this new business, and I was just like an online personal trainer, and I was like, this still doesn't feel right. This like very, gosh, patriarchal isn't the right word, but this very masculine way of training, like it just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't sit right with my body. And then my friend, who has a menstrual balancing supplement company, said, okay, hey, you're an exercise scientist. Can you look at this research paper for me and see if it's legit about, exercise in the menstrual cycle, and how these people are, it was a nutrition study as well. So it set these subjects up with exercise and nutrition that went along with their menstrual cycle. And it was the first study that I'd seen, and it was published in 2016. And I looked at it, I was like, oh, light bulb moment. Like, this is it. This is what I want to focus on. And I forget your question, but that was the moment that I knew that I wanted to focus on solely the menstrual cycle.
Anyone who's listening to this episode rather than watching it, Omega's smile when she reflects on this light bulb moment. Your smile was just so big and warming and heartfelt that it's like, oh, yes, it was just such an aha moment when the dots connected. So yeah, I love it when people have such sincere reactions, and that was just, yeah, that was a very powerful reaction. No, it's so lovely because there's so many people that just advocate for things because, but you can tell when someone actually lives a particular way, like trusts in the process and is just like, I've got to share this with everyone. And the way your smile lit up was like, people need to know this. So, it was lovely.
Yeah.
So based on sort of what you've read and what you've been researching and doing and all these sorts of things, what have you learned about, I guess, how women should train to sort of honor their menstrual cycle versus the whole we are small men, which we are not small men, idea of, you train the same time every morning, you do your intermittent fasting, high intensity interval, all the stuff that we know is specifically for men. And then we try and look, we still can get some great results, but we end up hormonally burnt out later on. If we were to sort of biohack our own biology and train to suit our cycle, what does that look like?
Yeah, so we have different hormonal capacities at each phase of our cycle. So we change week to week, every 6 days if we're in the bleed follicular ovulatory phase, every 11 to 14 days if we're in the luteal phase. So our exercise, we are honoring our body and actually mastering our hormones more when we train in alignment with our menstrual cycle. So in the bleed phase, our hormones are the lowest they will ever be. Some people report that they've made personal records with their lifting or whatever in their bleed phase because they feel really good. Other people are in their bed with cramps. And so during this time, I always like telling people, if you want to move. If movement feels good for you, move. If laying in bed feels better for you, great. Maybe do some twists. Maybe do some yogic twists while you're in bed, and keep it mellow. And after our bleed phase, if your listeners don't know yet, comes the follicular phase. And in the follicular phase, estrogen and testosterone start to come online, and that gives us a little bit more capacity for endurance and strength. So we can do endurance and strength exercises for about 6 days of our follicular phase. Then our ovulatory phase comes, and the moment of ovulation is really just like a literal moment, and the hours and days surrounding it is the days where our testosterone and estrogen is coming to its peak. And so in that time, we have more mental acuity, more physical strength, and more capacity to actually heal our muscles from exercise. Thank you, estrogen. Estrogen is great at doing that. Testosterone is too. Testosterone is always also great for giving us energy. So during that time, we can do skill-oriented movement. If you're an athlete, it's a great time for skills. High intensity training is my favorite at this time, or doing assessments is great during this time too. So if you're doing strength assessments or any physical assessments, it's a great time to do it in the ovulatory phase because we're at our physical peak. And then, of course, comes the luteal phase, which I like to call the proverbial wind down. And a person might notice in the first part of the luteal phase that they actually still feel really good. So we can still, depending on our energy levels, get away with strength training in the beginning of the luteal phase. It's still not a great time to do skills and drills and maybe lay off the high intensity training because our body has less capacity to recover. And then after that, in the week or 5 days leading up to our period, we might feel like we feel a little bit more drained. And so let me back up in the ovulatory and follicular phase. So estrogen and testosterone help us actually do high intensity training because our body is using our stored muscle sugar better. And that stored muscle sugar is called glycogen, right? So as estrogen and testosterone drop off in the luteal phase, we actually lose some of that ability to call on that stored muscle sugar to do this high intensity training. And so what is best during this time is low intensity, long duration training, which actually helps us utilize more fat. And I say very specifically, utilize more fat because we want to get out of the mentality of losing fat and this idea of like burning fat. I like the idea of utilizing fat better. So we utilize more fat in that late luteal phase. So again, it's a great time to do low intensity, long duration training. And it actually is better for our gut health too, to do that during that time, especially if we're feeling bloated, because that low intensity, long duration training is actually going to cause more of the healthy gut bacteria, which is we have the Firmicutes and Bacteroides. It helps. Oh gosh, now I'm forgetting it. I think it helps colonize more of the Bacteroides. You might need to fact check me on that. And that actually aids in great colon health. So that's it.
That's actually the first step. That's really
training
interesting.
regimen.
Yes, no, that's so interesting. Because I've learned about a few of the staples, and it's really interesting to me because I find that there's more than 50% of me that is like, this absolutely makes sense. Like our hormonal fluctuations happen all throughout the month. It makes sense that we have the capacity to train better for strength or for HIIT workouts, or we're more low intensity steady state sort of cardio, depending on where our hormones sit. But after so many years of conditioning as to do your strengths 5-6 days a week, do your cardio just before your weights or half an hour later, I still find myself with that resistance because of just all of that preconceived conditioning. And you probably would have been the same, being a competitor, is that even though we've done things, I'm going to just say the man way, we still got to stage with that process, and we still got strong, and we got lean, and we got all these things. But we also got, the hormonal repercussions of it too, which obviously no one's going to be advertising or promoting because it's just not healthy at all. Did you find sort of when you're learning about this information that while it resonated with you, that when it come to you sort of using them in your own day-to-day life, did you find it was a really easy transition to just go, oh, okay, I'm going to focus more so strength training on this 2-3 week period, and then around my cycle, I'm just going to do yoga, I'm going to walk? Or did you find that you sort of had a toe in the water, made a little change or two, and then sort of went back to your standard sort of training methods? And then like how did you sort of transition from your bodybuilding lifestyle to the way you train now?
Yeah. Again, like it was a light bulb moment for me. There was no resistance. And then I remember the first month I tried it and I was like, oh, this feels so much better than like trying to strength train 4 days a week. Like, like I had this like idea of like, what was I thinking? Right. Whereas there's really nothing wrong with that. If anybody listening is doing that and feels comfortable in that, there's nothing wrong with doing that. And there is a way to work with your hormones in a graceful, methodical, and way that's actually going to be customized for how you fluctuate throughout the month.
Did you find that as you sort of started to slow down in the certain periods of your cycle that sort of facilitated that you were more in tune with recognizing the styles of training that your body enjoyed at certain times of the month? I guess when I was training really intense and I had no period at all, there was no other option to slow down. Like it was just go, 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 go. And, you're running on adrenaline and cortisol and you're just like buzzing all the time. And you think that you're full of energy because you're so healthy, but really you're just running off, these hormones that are exhausting you. But it all feels good. But since I have slowed down with my training, and a big part of that was the HA and stopping, that when I did return to training, I actually it very much felt like a reset happened in my own mind, where now I do feel the shifts in my energy, where it's like, no, I actually feel primed and ready to lift some heavy weight, versus no, you know what, there's not actually one part of my being that wants to pick up a weight, like right now, I'm very happy to do a cruisy yoga flow or just have a stretch. But it took me to sort of slow down and create space in order to go, oh no, I don't need to always be dictating what to do. If I can actually just be with myself for a moment, I can actually work it out myself what I need in this time frame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like for me, it was very easy to tap into that feminine flow. Like, if for instance this morning, like I'm in my follicular phase right now. Yesterday was my first official day of the follicular phase, and I had YouTube workouts to film. So I filmed the workouts, and today I was feeling like very low energy this morning. I didn't get great sleep last night. And, there's this beautiful transitionary period in the follicular phase where I love the analogy where we're talking about follicular phase in terms of spring, like, the different phases of the cycle according to the different seasons, right? The follicular phase is akin to spring, and we're still going to wear our sweaters in the springtime. So we still have to, we're still in the incubation period of like nourishing our body. So, this morning, I just wanted that cruisy yoga flow that you mentioned, right? And that felt good to my body. And I know that's better for where I was hormonally too, because like I didn't sleep well last night. Maybe there's a cortisol melatonin thing going on. Like I literally did maybe 7 yoga poses and called it good. And then later in the afternoon, I had a little bit of energy and I did a quick 20-minute workout with bands and also called it good.
Yeah, I love how the ability to just say you're done when you're done versus being, I need to hit 60 minutes or I need to hit 35 minutes or I need to hit the heart rate, or it's so easy to have all of those rules and to just be able to go, oh no, you know what, I need something slow and twisty today. And then you've done your 7 poses and you go, oh, like that's exactly what I needed right now. I don't need to do 10. Like I don't have to prove that I can do 10 poses or that I need to do 8. It's like, no, 7 and I've achieved exactly what I wanted to. I can move on with my day. I found it like that's such a powerful thing, because for a lot of women that are stuck in the sort of disordered eating and overtraining field, that feels like unachievable. It's like, no, but I can't be satisfied with anything unless I hit XYZ. And like, absolutely, it takes so much time to get to a place where you can just have the comfort and the confidence to go, no, this is what I need today. And there is no expectation other than the capacity I've got in this moment. But it's like, you can get there if you're willing to just challenge your current fears and current modalities to the way you're living right now, and just be open to the fact that if you tune in, you know exactly what you need and you don't need to feel bad about it.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Well said, Jade. That's exactly what it is. It's like I like explaining what you said, and I'll just reinforce what you said with like this like self-compassion and self-discipline. I talk to my clients a lot about this. It's like self-compassion. Well, let's start off with self-discipline first. Self-discipline is like, yeah, knowing that the body needs to move. Like even when we bleed, some gentle twists can help us, or maybe a walk can help us. So like, being kind to our bodies and realizing that, yeah, we do need something, self-discipline. And then the self-compassion comes in is recognize it's a little bit more fluid. So recognizing what we actually need in that moment and having enough self-love to actually give our bodies what it's actually craving. And really our bodies know, and our bodies are always going to be talking to us and are always going to tell us exactly what they need. And it's up to us to be compassionate enough with our own selves to actually give it what they need, even though it can be scary in the healing process, because it's often so counterintuitive to what we think we need.
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like you're gritting your teeth at the start, doesn't it? It's like, to listen to what my body needs. It's like, no, that's not my schedule. Like that's not the plan. But it's just, you know, that's I guess where the life lessons and the growth is, isn't it? It's just learning to create space and to step away from preconceived notions. But yes, it's absolutely no small feat. And anyone who's on that path at the moment and is trying to just learn what exactly their body's trying to tell them, like it's tough, but it's so valuable. Like it will carry you through for the rest of your life. Like it's not something you're ever going to lose. It's one of the most valuable skills. I like just sort of, I guess, linking into the exercise side of things. I've got the virus at the moment, and that has meant that I made the conscious decision to not train for a couple of days because like I felt fine when I got tested, but I thought, oh, I'm really not sure what symptoms are going to arrive in the next couple of days. And rather than sort of put my body under this extra stress when clearly it's doing really well to keep these symptoms at bay, like I'm just going to nurture it a little bit. I'm just going to do some stretching if I feel like stretching, and that's it. I'm just going to conserve all the energy for whatever my body's doing to keep me healthy right now. And I remember just feeling no resistance to that decision. And that's something I never would have been able to do years ago. It would have been like, yeah, you can deal with the symptoms when they arrive, or da 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 da, you know, keep going. Training helps your immune system anyway, you know, keep pushing, burn it off, sweat it out. But it was really nice to just go, oh, you know, that's not what you need right now. And honestly, I haven't lifted any weights or done cardio in 8 days. And you know what? I've got no guilt around it purely because I can tell that's not what my body needs right now. Like it just needs some gentle movement. And it's not something I ever would have trusted in the past. Yeah. And if I did, it would have been like, well, you better manipulate your nutrition because if you're not burning the energy, should you really be eating? Like, should you do that? And I guess on the hunger cue side of things, because that's a big part of this whole journey as well, is that I'm actually so in tune with my hunger that I've noticed that I'm eating less, but it's not a conscious eat less. It's just I'm not getting as like it's a longer duration between hunger. And again, it's something that I never thought my body would be able to self-regulate appetite. It's like, no, my body knows when to eat because I tell it every 3 hours, or because I fast for 12. You know, there's all these things of you can't trust it. It doesn't know. And just this experience right now is sort of humbling in itself because it's just confirmation that you put in all that work to create the space for you to listen to your body. And it's so clever. Like it really does know exactly what's going on and how to care for you. You've just got to just build that relationship.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I feel like that's like a marker for healing, is like when you can really trust your body, like you said, your hunger cues, like you're naturally like the hunger cues are coming just a little less frequent because you're not training as often and you're trusting that process. And that's like, to me, that's like a beautiful marker of healing. I also had a virus, and I was yeah, it was back in July, and I was also like, you know, I couldn't eat for like 2 days, and that really wrecked me. And I remember finally, I think on the 5th day, I felt well enough to tie exercise bands to my bed frame and do like 3 sets of 15 rows. And I was like, that feels so good to move my body.
Yeah.
So good to my body. And like, then I did some squats with my bands. I'm like, oh, that feels amazing to move my body. And then I was like, and that's all I really want and need. Like, that's really all the juice that I have. And to me too, like that was like a beautiful moment of being like, yes, I love exercise. I've dedicated my life to it. And like, it was also a beautiful moment because I was like, yeah, I know what my body needs right now. My glutes have been inactive for 48 hours because I was laying in bed. And like, I just want to feel my butt a little bit and feel my back a little bit, you know, like,
I love how you just said too, like I'm like, I love to move my body. Like, I love this. This feels great. That is so different from oh gosh, I have to because it's been 48 hours and I haven't done anything. The way you said that and verbalized it, it very much come across like it was more of a celebration of movement rather than it's been too long since you last moved. It was more like, oh my gosh, my posture's back. Like, oh wow, I can feel my glutes again. Like, oh, this is lovely. And I guess, isn't that a beautiful thing too, when suddenly you're not always exercising to lift heavy and hit these PBs, and it's just like, no, because you know what, my body is magical and it feels so great and I'm so grateful for the way that it moves. Yeah, I love how you describe that, because it's movement should really be a celebration rather than this such aggression all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. And anybody who's learned weightlifting from any male-bodied person knows that a lot of what we've learned about movement is aggressive.
Yeah.
And it's not a celebration. It's more like, oh shoot, like I ate like this many more calories than I should have last night. I'm going to do extra cardio to burn it off.
Yes. It's always like to counteract something, and it's like, are you doing it because you feel free if you only do it to counteract a previous action? Like that's not really freedom of choice. It's like you feel like you have to, go against food that you overate, underate. And then I guess that's where all the locks begin though, isn't it? Because it's like, it's not a celebration. It's, oh, I've got to undo what I did, or I need to prepare myself for this feast that I'm going to have. And that's just where it all gets complicated. And it's just so sneaky. And, it's been really lovely talking to you, because I just feel like there's so much connection on the journeys of that sort of self-development, from the rigidity of bodybuilding and dieting to, gaining the weight and learning how your body feels like and what it does when it's just trying to heal, versus like finding balance again and having trust in that balance. Yeah, I thank you so much for coming on and just being willing to share just your whole journey, and those about training and complementing your cycle. And yeah, it's just been such a beautiful conversation. I can't thank you enough.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Jade, and thank you for just creating the space. You asked some really beautiful, great questions, so thank you so much for having me.
No, it's been a pleasure. Now, look, for anyone who is listening or watching, where is the best place for them to reach out if they would like to chat to you about improving on their health? Or, you've got some wonderful YouTube videos as well with yoga flows, and yes, I've binge watched them. Yes, where can everyone connect with you?
Yeah, so you can find me at Fitness Flow Method on YouTube and Instagram. And my website is fitnessflowmethod.com. And I love receiving DMs from people. So please feel free to reach out and DM me, if this podcast resonates with you, or if you have questions. I have a lot of great resources that I would, love to send anybody's way on nutrition and exercise and reducing PMS. Those are the things that I love to help people with.
Yes, and so many of our listeners will listen to that and go, yes, please, please. That's exactly the kind of information that we love to provide. And I will list all those details in the show notes. So if anyone wants to reach out with you, they absolutely can. And we will speak with you soon.
Okay, thank you, Jade.
Bye.